Reporters at NPR are now getting special training on how to deal with violent interactions at Trump rallies. Now, these are physical trainings where they would use physical force to protect themselves should anything go wrong at one of these rallies. Now, NPR has sent its political reporters to a 90-minute hostile environment awareness training, which in its typical form lasts a few days and prepares journalists for covering war zones or regions where terrorists are active. Now, organizations generally employ this type of training to help employees respond to hazards such as riots, mortar attacks, kidnappings, or firefights. I mean, they're not going to war. They're not going to the Middle East to cover the war. They're just simply covering the election and covering Trump rallies. That's how bad it's gotten at some of these rallies.
Well, it is a bit of a war zone. Michelle Fields was bruised up. That was a Breitbart. And that Breitbart was 100% pro-Trump. They're so pro-Trump, they basically asked Michelle Fields to leave after she said, complained that I got assaulted by his campaign manager. They're like, shut up already, right? And then there was a Time magazine reporter who was body slammed, let alone all the protesters who were assaulted, right?
And there's the violent rhetoric that definitely encourages people to act violently. Donald Trump has said that he wanted to punch a protester in the face. I mean, this is a guy who's running for president, talking about how he wants to punch someone in the face.
Not only that, he joked about how he probably wouldn't kill journalists.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
and you've been there, Jordan.
Listen, I can tell you firsthand. I've been to at least 6 or 7 of his events. There is, beyond just the violence, there's a mean-spiritedness and almost like a hyena mentality among his supporters. So when there's a protester starts shouting, if you don't have some really top-notch security there, they're lunging at protesters, even when they're not striking. I was just in Ohio. There was only one protester kicked out because they moved it out of Cincinnati, where they knew there would be a lot of African-American people, to a suburb, a more white suburb. And the protester that got kicked out, I was right near him, and people were lunging at him, and a security guard broke it up. When they're chanting USA, USA, listen, I'm not a psychologist, but I don't see it as patriotism. I see it as vitriol. They're angry. You know, they're chanting it because to them, something's been taken. I mean, I personally have been blocked from even leaving the media section. So a little behind the scenes, at Trump rallies, we're all put in the back, in the media pen, they call it, like a sheep a herd. And most campaigns let you out of the media section to actually report, talk to supporters, that kind of thing. The Trump campaign has blocked me and other reporters. I think we have video of it.
Of that, yeah.
We'll show it to you now.
You're not going to tell me why I can't walk out?
That y'all cannot. I don't want to be recorded.
So you're not going to tell me why we can't walk out?
Record me.
He's not going to tell us anything. So usually at other events, there is a section that blocks off the supporters from the media, but you're allowed to leave the media section.
That's insane. So you're not allowed to leave the media section to go interact with the Trump supporters.
It's even worse. When we were in Burlington, Vermont, Trump made the ballsy decision to go into Bernie country. They literally, because I jumped out of the media section to get an up-close shot of protesters getting kicked out, our producer Eric did the same thing. They shadowed Eric with a Trump staffer to make sure he kept his camera only on Trump, so he didn't tilt to actually show the protesters getting kicked out. I mean, this is...
Now, were they able to, physically, they would turn his hand if he turned it, or?
I wasn't standing next to him, so I don't know, but they stayed next to him, and I guess to see if, you can see if he's coming off Trump.
Now, when you were talking to that guy who wouldn't let you leave the Trump, the press pen, now, did any other reporters, did Mark Halperin experience that?
I wouldn't say Mark Halperin and other reporters there are too interested in leaving the press pen. They're very comfortable.
Yeah.
I pride myself on being a little bit more aggressive.
Right.
Wanting to actually. I don't want to sit there and type on Twitter. I want to get out and talk to people. Whereas the Halperins of the world and this and that, they're chummy with Trump. They're not
really.
They're not being pushy.
Jeez.
Really?
Yeah.
So they're not reporting on the stuff, because I saw your report on that. It was unbelievable when I saw it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I can't wait to see Dave Weigel. He's probably got a piece about this in the Washington Post about how they won't let him. I bet you Mark Halperin will have a thing on it. They didn't do anything on it. It's weird.
Nope.
It's weird. It's almost like they're afraid to report how horrible Donald Trump's campaign is.
What's incredible is all these right-wingers talking about the tyranny under the Obama administration and how they're so concerned about that. And at the same time, you have a presidential candidate who is violating the Constitution in every way imaginable. I mean, he's violating the First Amendment, which I would argue is the most important. He's not letting journalists do their jobs, which is go out there, speak to the protesters, speak to the supporters, figure out what it is. It's freedom of the press. How does he have the right to tell you or tell any reporter that they need to stay in their little section?
It goes further than that because there's been new reports coming out that the Trump campaign is blacklisting reporters from Politico, Huffington Post, obviously, because they've been critical, BuzzFeed, who write a critical piece that day, their credentials get yanked. And then they wait in the general admission line to get in like a normal citizen, and a lot of them have to wait for hours, and sometimes they're yanked out if it's spotted that they're with the organization. I mean, this is not freedom of the press.
But you see the press is revolting en masse against stuff like this, right?
No, because he is help.
I mean,
Here's what
Chuck
happened.
Todd's not going to let him call in at his convenience anymore, so that's a big deal.
Oh,
Yeah.
What a pushback.
Look, it has to do with access, but more importantly, it has to do with how difficult it is to be a principled journalist, right? In order to be a principled journalist, you have to be uncomfortable. You have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations where there's going to be conflict, there's going to be a back and forth. You're right. A lot of journalists like their cushy jobs where they sit behind a computer and they tweet all day.
Yep.
Very easy, right? And so they don't want to stir the pot. They don't want any trouble.
Now, to be fair to a lot of guys on the ground, they get a lot of pressure from their editors. Don't lose the access. What do I have you out there for if you don't have access? So he's thinking like, man, if I cross these Trump guys, then I get blacklisted, and then I don't know if I get fired or I get called back to the home office. All of a sudden, I don't have this job anymore. Right. So that's the number one pressure point that Trump has that he uses. Look, to give you guys context, we were at a Bernie rally here in LA a couple of days ago, and they have a press section. We're in the press section. The press can go in and out of that section. I don't think that it would have ever occurred to the Bernie Sanders campaign to make sure the press did not interact with his supporters. They'd be like, yeah, that's the whole point why you're here. I want you to cover the rally. I want you to cover my supporters. Trump doesn't want you to talk to his supporters. He's got you bottled up, and he won't let the press out. That's crazy. It's unprecedented.
And he said
I never heard anything like that.
He said he loves the poorly educated, so I don't know why he won't let us talk to a lot of these supporters. But yeah, it is scary. There's been a few times when I've been interviewing a Trump supporter, and I personally felt that he might take a swing at me. And I'm not even going over the top. I mean, I'm definitely a little bit more aggressive than an NBC reporter. I'm not interested in the horse race or the process. I want to know. I push them with facts. Are you aware of it? His tax plan would give you $100 and a plutocrat $1 million. Oh, that's not true. And then when I push him on it, one guy in Vermont was like, "Get out of my face." And I've had, when I'm interviewing Trump supporters, other people online that are supporting him, screaming obscenities at me, this and that. So it is not, it's a hostile environment.
It's incredible.
I'm amused by the idea of get out of my face with your facts. Otherwise,
totally
I'll punch
true.
you.
It's totally true. Look, I was running in my neighborhood and I came across a Trump supporter and I asked him simple questions. He was holding a Trump sign, right? So I was like, oh, let me grab my phone and ask him a few questions. I asked him, what's your favorite Trump policy, right? And Make America Great Again. That was his answer.
Yep.
And then when I posted it on my YouTube channel, some of the comments were talking about how I was too aggressive toward him. Why? Because I'm asking him questions to point to his ignorance.
But that goes to show you what a horrible state journalism is in this country. That people have forgotten what journalism's supposed to be. Journalism is supposed to be a watchdog of the government. You're supposed to challenge the people in power and hold them to account. But we haven't done that for so long in this country that people are like, whoa, that seems rude if you don't just report whatever they spoon feed you and you ask them aggressive questions.
It's rude if you're not playing patty cakes with them.
Right, whether it's a government official or it's anybody. I mean, you could, whether it's a supporter, it's whoever you're interviewing, you're supposed to try to get facts from them, right? And you're supposed to, get to the underlying facts of the whole situation, right? So one more thing about this. Now, Trump does not have the power of the government behind him yet. He uses excuses like, well, I rented out this place, so it's my private property, so I can treat you any way I like, whether you're a protester or you're press, etc. But this guy's running for president. if he becomes president, then he has the full might of the U.S. government behind him. And then if he does this to the press when he's president, and by the way, he says he will. He says he might do worse if he's president, right? And then we've got a constitutional crisis. Because here's a president who'd be saying, I'm ripping up the First Amendment. You don't have the rights as press that you used to have for time immemorial in this country, since the beginning of this country. So that's how you lose a democracy.